computer, sound off. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You can just call us or text 870-275-9799. We don't want you to call at the top of the next hour, though, because that's when our board op / producer / call screener Joe will be taking the Conduit for Action quiz that we have ready to go at 7. You can also go to facebook.com/Conduit News if you would like. That's facebook.com/Conduit News. By the way, the quiz this week centers around term limits and the benefits of those term limits. And, that's what our whiteboard has said most of the week. It's just said term limits. And I know it's kind of becoming a controversial issue when you look at what the politicians on Facebook and things like that, what they're saying. And, some of them, some of these politicians who are coming out against term limits or the new term limit amendment that is likely to make it onto the ballot now that they collected 135,000 signatures and they needed 85,000. Sometimes you just have to respectfully disagree with the opposition, and I'm sure there are people listening to this that are not so sure about the term limits. Now, here's the key. This is what I feel like it all rests in when it comes to term limits. You got to figure out here in Arkansas is the current situation. The current situation with corruption, is that because we have people staying down there too long? I mean, is the current crop of legislators that we have such a problem with that are really, in many ways, an embarrassment to the concept of good government, is that the result of longer terms, of staying down there longer? I mean, my hypothesis is that yes, that's why. That's why we have what we have right now, is because they've stayed down there too long, right? Call me crazy. And the other side, in my opinion, when they say, well, you don't understand, the legislators need to stay down there, the politicians need to stay down there longer so that they can get a handle on the bureaucracy. It's hard for me to not think. I think those are theoretical benefits. I mean, I don't see that as something tangible that I can absolutely verify. I can't verify that. I mean, and maybe you can't verify the other either, but I think you've just got to make an educated, an educated hypothesis, an educated guess, if you will. And I'm under the opinion, and I don't think it's a crazy opinion, but I'm under the opinion that the reason we have so much corruption down there right now is because they're down there too long. I was reading an article the other day, and they used the word anathema. They said a career politician is an anathema to the concept of good government, or the concept of American government specifically. I thought that was pretty profound. What does real leadership look like? What does real leadership look like? I tell you what it looks like. It looks like President Donald Trump sitting across from the Secretary of the United Nations the other day. What's this guy's name? Stoltenberg or whatever? And essentially, what did I say? EU? UN, I'm sorry, yeah. The NATO, I'm sorry, NATO. Sitting across from the NATO Secretary. My apologies. And this is what it sounded like. Joe, I want you to hear this, because I'm going to compare this. I'm going to bring this down to an Arkansas level, because I was reminded of somebody while I was watching this yesterday. Go ahead and hit play. This is yesterday. Donald Trump at a breakfast with the NATO secretary. And listen to what he says.
At the summit, among them is defense spending. And we all agree that we have to do more. I agree with you that we have to make sure that allies are investing more. The good news is that allies have started to invest more in defense. After years of cutting defense budgets, they have started to add billions to the defense budgets. And last year was the biggest increase in defense spending across Europe and Canada in a generation.
Why was that last year?
It's also because of your leadership, because your clear message, and
They won't write that. But
no,
All right, stop for a second.
Before,
All right, pause right there. Okay. So you have the NATO secretary there, and he's saying, look, we've increased our defense spending. There's this whole problem where you're supposed to give 2% of your GDP, and nobody does it. America does it, but nobody else does. We give way more. And you hear Donald Trump saying, and why did you increase last year? And the secretary says, well, it's because of your leadership. So let's just establish the fact that Donald Trump, President Trump, has, in fact, gotten some of these countries to contribute more. Now, they're still not meeting the thresholds that they're supposed to. And yesterday, after this meeting, the president came out and said not only should they be contributing 2%, they need to think about contributing 4% of their GDP. I don't know, does America do 4? We do? Well, you know what's that's crazy? Because we have reports that America does 4, and yet the mainstream press on the way in was saying America doesn't even do 4%. I listened to a Westwood One broadcast on the way in this morning, and they said America doesn't even do 4%. So, you know, there's conservative outlets that say we do. There's others that don't. But regardless, 3.6. Okay. Okay, so 3.6. The UK's at 2.1 when it comes to funding NATO. All right, good. Thank you, Joe, on getting those statistics. So keep going here. I want you to hear, because, you know, when you look like a hypocrite, you know, a lot of people in politics, if you point out other people's hypocrisies, then you're a bad guy. You're not a team player. I mean, that's what you hear down at the Marble Palace a lot, right? Don't you? Now, who does this sound like? Hit play. Let's listen again. President Donald Trump thought this was amazing yesterday. Leadership. This is what it looks like. Listen.
The thing is that it really has, your message is having an impact, and we are going to build on that to make sure that we have further increases. You initiated last year that all allies are going to develop national plans on how to spend more on defense. And based on these national plans, we now estimate that European allies and Canada will add 266 extra US dollars for defense from now until billion US dollars until 2024. So this is really adding some extra money. It helps, and we're moving in the right direction, but we still have to do more, and that is what we're going to address at the summit later on today. Let me also add that
all right, so this guy's drowning on. Can you skip forward just a little bit?
Sad.
Here we go.
When Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia. So we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting all of these countries, and then numerous of the countries go out and make a pipeline deal with Russia, where they're paying billions of dollars into the coffers of Russia. So we're supposed to protect you against Russia, but they're paying billions of dollars to Russia, and I think that's very inappropriate. And the former chancellor of Germany is the head of the pipeline company that's supplying the gas. Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got in. It should have never been allowed to have happened. But Germany is totally controlled by Russia, because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO, and I don't think it should have happened. And I think we have to talk to Germany about it. On top of that, Germany is just paying a little bit over 1%, whereas the United States, in actual numbers, is paying 4.2%.
There we go.
A much larger GDP.
There we go.
So I think that's inappropriate also. You know, we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting everybody, and yet we're paying a lot of money to protect. Now, this has been going on for decades. This has been brought up by other presidents, but other presidents never did anything about it, because I don't think they understood it, or they just didn't want to get involved. But I have to bring it up because I think it's very unfair to our country, it's very unfair to our taxpayer, And I think that these countries have to step it up, not over a 10-year period. They have to step it up immediately. Germany is a rich country. They talk about they're going to increase it a tiny bit by 2030. Well, they could increase it immediately tomorrow and have no problem. I don't think it's fair to the United States. So we're going to have to do something because we're not going to put up with it. We can't put up with it, and it's inappropriate. So we have to talk about the billions and billions of dollars that's being paid to the country that we're supposed to be protecting you against. You know, everybody's talking about it all over the world. They'll say, well, wait a minute, we're supposed to be protecting you from Russia, but why are you paying billions of dollars to Russia for energy? Why are countries in NATO, namely Germany, having a large percentage of their energy needs paid, you know, to Russia and taken care of by Russia? Now, if you look at it, Germany is a captive of Russia because they supply. They got rid of their coal plants. They got rid of their nuclear. They're getting so much of the oil and gas from Russia. I think it's something that NATO has to look at. I think it's very inappropriate. You and I agree that it's inappropriate. I don't know what you can do about it now, but it certainly doesn't seem to make sense that they pay billions of dollars to Russia, and now we have to defend them against Russia.
You know,
All right, pause.
NATO is the alliance of
Pause right there. All right. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, was American leadership. I think at its finest, certainly. I mean, when's the last time you've heard an American president actually do something like that and stand up for America? Now, regardless, I mean, think about this for a second. Either way, this whole NATO alliance is about us defending them. I don't see why we should pay 4.2%. You know, why are we paying more to defend them? And this is the whole argument. You know, Donald Trump will come he comes on over the top he comes back behind this other argument on the NATO thing, and he says, not to mention we have these trade, imbalances, and so then it just even compounds, the trade imbalance with the European Union and the NATO thing. It's like, come on, enough is enough already. So I got to thinking, you know how Donald Trump, I mean, he was just over and over, he says that you're a captive, that Germany's a captive to Russia. That, Germany is making Russia rich. He goes on to say that here in a minute. We'll probably listen to that as well. And I just thought to myself, how many times, how often do we see this in the state legislature where somebody goes down to the well and calls out the inconsistencies of the leadership and how they really don't have the best interests of the people of Arkansas at heart. How it's a rigged system. Notice how you've got the former chancellor who's head of the pipeline company. And Donald Trump points that out, how that's not right. That the person who's inked this deal that has essentially made Germany a captive as far as their energy to Russia, and yet we're spending all this money to protect them from Russia, and how hypocritical that is. I mean, anybody that would say anything like that, for example, if you had somebody that went down to the state house and the state capitol, maybe in the state senate, and started talking about how the leadership promised an amazing verification system when it came to, making sure those who were supposed to be on a welfare program are actually supposed to be on the welfare program. Or, those who are taking massive sums of money and cash from insurance companies or from Medicaid providers, and they're not really disclosing that they're now some fancy consultant, and now they're making all of this money from Medicaid entities, and that may have something to do with the fact that they continue to vote to spend taxpayer money to give to insurance companies, to give to hospitals, to support. When you bring up those things, no. In Arkansas, you're not a leader, are you? No. You're just not a team player. You don't understand. When you say that stuff, and of course I'm talking about Senator Brian King. Senator Brian King and a few others have courageously pointed out these hypocrisies when it comes to those in Arkansas government, and they're just looked at really looked at with disdain, with disgust. How dare you try to say that we don't have the best interest? How dare you try to say that we're not budgeting conservatively or we're not conservatives? That's the way he's looked at. And you know what? That's exactly the way the liberal press is reacting to what Donald Trump said. I just think it's funny. If you're an Arkansas politician and you are in leadership, and let's say you like what Donald Trump said yesterday about NATO, let's say you like the fact that he stood up for America, I would just say, I guess I should point out, some of your own hypocrisies and say, hey, I kind of think, when that kind of stuff happens here at the local level, you guys just, you guys reject it. You guys reject it. Leadership, ladies and gentlemen, the ones who are consistent, when it all is laid bare and it's all out there for the people and more people understand just how corrupt the system is, those who are consistent hopefully are in the position to lead us out of the mess that government so often creates. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in just a moment. This is for all you big government establishment Republicans out there. Hope you're listening. I keep a close watch on these votes of mine. I keep my finger in the wind all the time. I vote big government, and you will pay with your dime. 'Cause every time I toe the line. There's always an excuse not to shrink government. It's much easier just to toe that line. I find it very easy to be rhino blue. I find I'm not alone when failing to come through. Yes, big government, I'm a fool for you. 'Cause every time I toe that line. Legislative sleight of hand would be an accurate description. Or you could just say, they can't quit towing that party line. As sure as night is dark and day is light, I'll vote big government both day and night. And act like I'm shocked when it all comes to light. 'Cause every time I toe the line. The phrase toe the line is the equivalent of toe the mark, both of which mean to conform to a rule or standard. You could also call it the status quo. Tax and spend, I'm always on your side. I love writing government checks that I cannot hide. Buying people's votes always turns the tide. 'Cause every time I toe the line. The Oxford Dictionary Word Histories. The idiom toe the line, from an athletics analogy, originated in the early 19th century. I hope you don't watch these votes of mine. Hope you don't see through the lies and slime. 'Cause I plan on spending with your dime because every time I toe the line. You know, toeing the line is what the folks down in Little Rock call progress.
PHP Parody. Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Tomorrow is Johnny Cash Friday. For our online audience, you guys don't get to hear the Johnny Cash music, but our terrestrial radio affiliates do. So we've got something special planned for our online audience. During the silence, we're going to be playing some presidential speeches. It's going to be good, educational, and entertaining. Get back to what happened with NATO and President Donald Trump yesterday. Listen to this.
29 nations, and there are sometimes differences and different views and also some disagreements. And the gas pipeline from Russia to Germany is one issue where allies disagree. But the strength of NATO is that despite these differences, we have always been able to unite around our core task to protect and defend each other, because we understand that we are stronger together than apart. I think that 2 world wars and the Cold War taught us that we are stronger together than apart.
But how can you be together when a country is getting its energy from the person you want protection against or from the group that you want protection?
Because we understand that when we stand together, also when dealing with Russia, we are stronger. I think what we have seen is that...
No, you're just making Russia richer.
Well,
you're not dealing with Russia, you're making Russia richer.
Well, I think that even during the Cold War, NATO allies were trading with Russia. Then there have been disagreements about what kind of trade arrangements we should go
I think trade is wonderful. I think energy is a whole different story. I think energy is a much different story than normal trade. And you have a country like Poland that won't accept the gas. You take a look at some of the countries, they won't accept it because they don't want to be captive to Russia.
Wow.
But Germany, as far as I'm concerned, is captive to Russia because it's getting so much of its energy from Russia. So we're supposed to protect Germany, but they're getting their energy from Russia. Explain that. And it can't be explained, you know that.
All right, thank you, press. Thank you. Thank you.
It's like, all right, thank you, press. Stop. All right, that is American leadership. I mean, everybody in... the reason I started the show with this, folks, is because when it happened yesterday, everybody in the state, everybody in the country, you need to hold your head a little higher, because he is not a status quo guy. He is exposing so much that is wrong with the international order of things, so to speak. Tim on Facebook writes, Arkansas, if you like the direction our country is going under Donald Trump, then you must understand that Arkansas, too, can be turned around. It's as simple as stop believing the lies and going to the ballot box. As long as we have 18% voter participation, we will keep getting what we have. It's really as simple as saying no more, getting off the couch, and demanding the government you want. Tim, excellent point. Folks, check us out. It's facebook.com/Conduit News. Back in just a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, the phone number, if you want to call or text, 870-275-9799. I want to introduce you to Chris Ann Hall. Chris Ann was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. She began her career as a biochemist, a Russian linguist for the U.S. Army, a prosecutor for the state of Florida. She also practiced First Amendment law for a prominent national nonprofit law firm. She joins us now on the phone. Chris Ann, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I'm just excited to be here.
I am too, and I want to thank the people that put us together, made this interview happen, because very excited. I've been watching a lot of your videos, listening to your discussions and your educational efforts of grassroots people trying to make a difference, trying to let them realize the benefits of our freedom and our individual rights and the Constitution of the United States. Can you tell us, share with our audience a little bit about how you got started in all of this?
Well, I went to law school, and learned about the law. And while I was in law school, I came across some friends. I made some friends in the Federalist Society, began reading about the founders. I just happened across a book called here we go. I've already forgotten the name of the book. Oh, The Founding Brothers. And I read it. It was real short story, just a collection of short stories, and it was a real interesting, quick read. And it made me interested in the founders themselves. So I began reading their writing. And it sort of, doing that sparked the inner rebel in me, because I began to realize that what I was learning in law school had absolutely nothing to do with the Constitution itself. And as a matter of fact, as I took the constitutional law class that I had, I realized that much of what I was learning was actually contrary to the Constitution. And so it made me want to know, the truth. You know, it sort of made me angry that we were supposedly learning the Constitution. We were going to be taking an oath to the Constitution, and yet we were learning really nothing about it. And, it's sort of a long kind of journey, just picking it up here and there. And then I was a prosecutor, then I went to work for the First Amendment law firm. And then after my sabbatical with the First Amendment nonprofit was over, I went back to the state attorney.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yes, it's real. Yes, there is a swamp. Yes, there's a swamp in Little Rock. The first step of getting rid or draining the swamp is admitting that it is there. It exists. For a long time, Arkansas politicians got away with saying, "Well, we do things different. We're not like D.C. down here. We this is government that works." Yeah, you guys try to imitate everything they do. You certainly, I mean, good grief, there's a reason the Capitol itself is a replica of the Capitol in D.C. The number 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799 if you want to be a part of the program. We are going to transition. Now, a couple of weeks ago, the Attorney General, Leslie Rutledge, decided to finally release her opinion in response to an inquiry by Senator Linda Collins Smith. The question was, is there a penalty for carrying a weapon without a concealed handgun license? And the specifically, what is the penalty? Is it in the law, meaning if you do X, you are punished with Y? What is it? And the first two sentences of the Attorney General opinion essentially answer Senator Linda Collins Smith's question and say there is no penalty for carrying a weapon in the law without a concealed hand. That doesn't exist. But then she goes on in her opinion and muddies the water and makes some very, very odd claims. And we have had guests on to talk about this, and we have tried to analyze it the best we can. But right now, if there's one article you read, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because it is extremely, some of it is inside baseball and it gets into the minutia, but I'm going to go over some of the highlights. Over at Conduit for Action right now, that's conduitforaction.org, David Ferguson, who has an extensive, distinguished career. You guys all know him. He used to work for the Bureau of Legislative Research writing laws, and a lot of people say, well, what does the Bureau of Legislative Research do? Why do we have to have them? Well, they figure out how to, if you're a legislator and you want something done, they figure out how to write the law. Then they also have to think, well, how will this law affect the other statutes, the other laws. How's it going to, is it going to, it's, imagine how big government is, and imagine, you're wanting to avoid contradictions and things like that. So, and that's a very crude way of explaining what the Bureau does, by the way, by me. The headline here is bound to be controversial to some people, but you've got to read the substance of what David Ferguson is saying here. The headline here, Attorney General opinion favoring gun control is flawed. Attorney General opinion favoring gun control is flawed. Now, one of the things that David Ferguson does remind us of is that in 2015, Attorney General Leslie Rutledge admitted that open carry of a handgun is permissible. She admitted that in that 2015 opinion, but then she also had some caveats like police, if you're acting funny or something, or if you look strange, then the police can come up and question you, and which is in my opinion, wrong. And then she said that you still have to have a concealed handgun license to carry it concealed, but you don't have to have anything to carry it open. That was contorted because it was designed to bail out, pun intended, the Arkansas State Police, because they get so much of their money from the licensing fees or permission slip fees where you're selling their rights back to you. And there's so many people that actually have been conditioned to believe they have to have the government's permission to exercise their Second Amendment rights in the state of Arkansas. So it's good that David Ferguson brings up the 2015 opinion. But then he writes also this, and he gives Leslie Rutledge some credit here. Attorney General Rutledge works hard and generally does a good job, but something went very wrong with opinion 2018-022. He writes, it's not just that the opinion does not withstand scrutiny. It's that the two primary arguments made in the opinion are supported by a false statement of law and a false statement of case law. That makes this article hard to write. I keep wondering, did some overzealous and inexperienced law clerk mislead Attorney General Rutledge? He breaks down four basic things you need to know about the opinion. That the opinion uses a false statement of law as support for an argument declaring an implied prohibition of carrying concealed handgun without a license. The opinion falsely states a presumption in case law and thereby makes it appear that carrying a concealed handgun might be presumed illegal by the courts. The opinion argues that since the crime of carrying a weapon includes a list of permissible uses, but doesn't mention carrying without a license, then unlicensed carry must be prohibited. David Ferguson writes, as I will explain later, this way of looking at the list produces illogical results and cannot stand. And I'll give you a scenario that here in a minute. It's actually quite fascinating. Number 4, principles of criminal law do not support the notion of creating crimes by implication. Creating crimes by implication, which is really strange when, and I guess that's what you have to do. You have to create crimes by implication if in the beginning of your opinion you admit that in the statute there is no penalty for doing what you are claiming is illegal. Then you're going to have to imagine things, right? Now, I'm no attorney, but David Ferguson is. So we have misstatements of law, false statements. You have the argument bringing irrational results. Let's just kind of hit some of the highlights here, shall we? False statement concerning the statute. The opinion argues there is an implied prohibition against carrying a concealed handgun based on the existence of a concealed carry license. And they talk about 5-73-310, acknowledges that a concealed carry license represents, quote, now this is what was so maddening to me. In the opinion, quote, the legal means to carry a concealed handgun. David Ferguson points out, though, that's not what the statute says. Now, hang on a second. How does that happen? How do you have an opinion quoting the law to try to support your argument, but you actually misquote the law? Quote, the legal means to carry a concealed handgun, end quote. That's not what the statute says. The statement was created with selective editing that avoids including an important word. The statute actually refers to, quote, a legal means, not the legal means. The statute merely says an applicant for a license must include a statement that the applicant desires a legal means to carry a concealed handgun to defend himself or herself. Not the legal means, a legal means. Isn't that interesting? That's the first bit. I mean, that's just false. That was just a false. Yeah. We can't agree on the definition of words and phrases, but come on, can't we expect our public officials, if they're issuing opinions, to actually look up what the law says and print it accurately in your opinion? No, we can't. I mean, apparently that's the case. Number two, a false statement concerning presumption under case law. They cite cases, 3 Arkansas cases. Quote, courts might apply a presumption that a person carrying a concealed handgun without a concealed carry license has the intent to attempt to unlawfully employ the handgun. I'm glad that David Ferguson addressed this point by saying this is not what the presumption in the case law stands for. This false statement is surprising considering the Attorney General presented a reasonable statement of presumption in Opinion 2015-064, where the Attorney General said in that opinion, quote, there are a line of Supreme Court cases that arguably suggest, mostly in dicta, the existence of a presumption that the possession of a handgun, and certainly a loaded handgun, signifies that the handgun was intended to be employed as a weapon. David Ferguson writes, McGuire versus the state in 1979 is the most recent, only case cited by the Attorney General, and it was under the law as it existed before the passage of Act 746. So feel free to read. Let's move on to the next portion here. You should share this article with your friends, by the way. Now let's talk about the irrational results. If you take the Attorney General's opinion on the Second Amendment and you get these and you actually try to apply it, you're going to get irrational results, which means that there's something wrong here with the logic. The opinion notes that within the offense of carrying a weapon, quote, the statute explicitly states that it is permissible to carry if the person is in possession of a concealed handgun and has a valid license to carry a concealed handgun and is not in a prohibited place. But the statute does not say the same about carrying a concealed handgun without a concealed carry license. A court might imply from the statutory language that carrying a concealed handgun without a concealed carry license is not permissible and thus allows the intent necessary to violate Section 5-73-120A. David Ferguson writes, in a nutshell, this argument says because the offense of carrying a weapon includes a list of authorized uses, the list serves to limit the ability of a person to carry a handgun. So, meaning if it's not on the list, then you can't do it. And that's flawed logic, okay? Because if you take that to its conclusion, you get some very strange results. David Ferguson writes, having written legislation for Arkansas legislators for over 3 decades, I recognize the problem the drafter faced in trying to revise the statute. Not amending the list was not an option because it was a list of defenses, which is inconsistent with the purpose of the amendment. To impose the burden on the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a defendant had an unlawful intent. The drafter could have deleted the list as unnecessary, but some people would have wondered why, and some would have wondered if the drafter was trying to call into question uses once listed as defenses. The drafter chose, instead, to keep the list, but to convert it into a list of positive statements, not negative statements. That was the whole point of Act 746, folks. It decriminalized the possession of a firearm, which was really good, which essentially means, we've said this before, I heard somebody say it, that, you know, there's no law that says that you're allowed specifically to sit on your front porch and drink iced tea, but there's no law prohibiting you to do so either, and that's the status of our gun laws here if you read Act 746. And so we scroll down here. I want to get to the scenario here because this is there's a scenario down here in the bottom that really to me it illustrates the absurdity of this whole situation. Let me see here if I can't find it. The Attorney General appears to assume the word license. Let's see here. Hang on one second. I just had it right here in front of me. Yeah, it had to do with the fact that you know, if you take these conclusions that she comes to and you actually apply them, then you wouldn't be able to. Yeah, here it is. Likewise, using this logic, you could not carry a concealed handgun in your own house without a license, because applying this logic would say, although you may carry a handgun in your house, item C8 requires you to have a license if you are going to carry concealed in your own home. Both examples show the argument is not a reasonable interpretation. Instead of the government trying to imply prohibitions based on something not being found in the list, the statute must be read as a list of specific permissible uses, not a limitation or a restriction. Now imagine that. Here's an attorney that's worked for the Bureau for over 30 years, is retired, and is looking at this opinion and saying that just doesn't make sense. You're essentially doing mental gymnastics in order to, you know, I guess, you know, what she's trying to do, you know, pitch it to the legislature. The idea that if you logically put this out, that you couldn't carry a gun in your own home without a license, that doesn't make any sense. What's the end game here? Scrolling down to E. The claim of confusion and the end game. The Attorney General suggests there is so much confusion over concealed carry that the legislature should revisit the law to clarify it. Some gun rights advocates have already referred to this assertion as confusion, as manufactured confusion. And David Ferguson writes, I must agree. They are rightfully concerned that the end game is to get the legislature to reconsider the handgun laws so politicians will have an opportunity to weaken the law. Similar to how the legislature was talked into amending a simple campus carry bill for college staff and thereby transforming it into the regulatory nightmare called enhanced carry. Confusion exists not because of the law, but because of the Attorney General's opinions and statements by Governor Hutchinson claiming concealed carry requires a license. If they persist, a test case to resolve the matter will be necessary. Gun control advocates know that they win by either sending the issue back to the legislature with a chance to weaken the law, or by forcing a test case that could take years, not just for a case to come to trial, but to ultimately be a case to make it to the Arkansas Supreme Court, where a statewide precedent would be set. Again, check this article out. Share it with your friends. Definitely need to read it and understand it. And it does a great job of really dissecting the flawed opinion that the Attorney General wrote in response to Senator Linda Collins Smith asking the simple question, is there a penalty specifically laid out in the law for carrying a weapon without a concealed weapon without a license? So, yeah, and I would, you know what, I would expect, here's a prediction, and I got a text message just saying this, and I would agree. I have a text message of somebody predicting what people are going to do with this. Again, the headline here, AG opinion favoring gun control is flawed. You're going to hear people start to claim victimhood if this article gets out, to a bunch of people. That's gonna be the reaction, to ignore the substance of it, to ignore the messenger who is extremely credible, Mr. David Ferguson, and they'll start to claim victim. This was a simple request, a simple letter. The Attorney General could have answered it and put to bed this whole notion of confusion. The law, again, is not confusing. The people in positions of power that are it's almost like they're trying to contain Pandora. It's like they think it's a Pandora's box. It's really not. Things are going to be fine. When people, an armed society is a polite society. Many politicians campaign based on that concept, but when it actually comes to implementing, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, we have excuses for why it can't be done. We're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, coming up, we got the Conduit for Action quiz is back, and it's on term limits, which is fast becoming a very controversial issue. As is issue 1, obviously, the bad tort reform amendment. We got some big ballot initiatives. These ballot initiatives, I have found, as I've been watching them, I guess since 2014, really close. So that's when we all voted on the issue 3 of John Woods, and then you had the jobs amendment, which wasn't really a jobs amendment in 2016. That passed that basically enabled the state of Arkansas to increase their debt. What I have found is that these ballot initiatives, most of the time, nobody knows anything about them. Your average Arkansan doesn't know, and if they're written by the legislature, then they're going to be written deceptively most of the time. And most people just kind of vote yes. It's amazing how we are wired to. It's like this is an amendment to the Arkansas Constitution. You're being asked to amend the Arkansas Constitution, and most people get in the ballot box, they get to the questions, and they just vote yes. And with a deceptive ballot title, then, the people that do read it, you're now basically kind of taking care of any organized or any last minute, people that are educated, affluent. Maybe they don't know about the issues, but they can read and comprehend and make an informed decision. Well, with John Wood's issue 3 that expanded term limits, it was claiming it was setting term limits. I talked to very intelligent people that voted for it thinking they were setting term limits. They didn't know we already had term limits. You see what I'm saying? So there needs to be, I think, an organized effort. Conduit News is going to try to get this information to as many people as possible. We would ask that you guys out there, patriots, would help us to do this. And, Thomas Jefferson said, an educated citizenry is indispensable to the proper functioning of a republic. That's what we've got to have. We have to have people educated. They have to know what the issues are. So, for example, issue 1 that's going to be on the ballot is the Tort Reform Amendment. And it's the bad Tort Reform Amendment is the way I'm calling it, because I oppose it, and I think it's really, really bad. But you're going to have people, you're going to start seeing ads telling you how great it is, telling you how it's going to make our health care better, how it's going to bring jobs here. Well, we had Jerry Cox on, the president of the Family Council, who opposes issue 1 earlier this week, and he systematically debunked all of their arguments and says that it's a pro-life organization, and they're opposing it because it's not a pro-life way to look at, reforming our justice system. And so, we've got to get the information out there. But then then you're going to have casinos, maybe that's possibly on the ballot. We don't know. But then you're going to have term limits, which is a good thing in my opinion. So the ballot initiatives coming up are really big deals. With the term limits one, I think the people have a big chance to send a message to put a check on government. And, if you don't like bureaucracies, why don't you get in there and try to actually reform the bureaucracies? Why don't you run a law that says if a bureaucrat lies to a committee, that they have that there are criminal proceedings and criminal penalties that can be pursued if it is found out that a bureaucrat misled or lied? I mean, I think these bureaucrats, when they go down to the end of that table in the committee room at the Marble Palace, they should be extremely careful with what they say and the assurances they provide, because oftentimes the assurances they provide are misleading, if not outright lies. And that's what I would like to stop. So why can't we run a bill that says that these bureaucrats, are something akin to under oath? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe scale it back a little bit. But there's got to be something that we can do. I mean, that's the first thing I would do to try to rein in these, the alleged, the bureaucrats control everything. We have no power. Well, let's start putting these people under oath then and prosecuting them when it's found out that they misled a legislative committee.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Office where a new state attorney, a former coworker, had been elected. And I didn't realize that we had differing ideologies. And so when I live in a small rural community, and the people knew what I had, began to learn what I had been practicing in First Amendment law. So I was invited by the school board to come and teach them on how to have prayer before the school board meeting and not have the ACLU all over them. And I started teaching in a program we have here in Florida called Justice Teaching, where lawyers and judges go into the schools and teach on the First Amendment. And then I started speaking at local civics groups, like the Tea Party groups, and was invited to speak on the radio about the unconstitutionality of Obamacare. And apparently my boss heard that interview and started looking into my after-hours activities and decided that he didn't like them. And so he sent me an email and told me that I had to cease and desist all my association with right-wing fringe groups, those fifth graders that I was teaching. And I had to stop teaching the Constitution the way I was teaching it, because to teach that the Constitution, he said, required limited government was an ethical conflict of interest for anyone who worked for the government. And so I simply explained to him, I'm doing this on my own time. I'm not talking about my job. I'm not talking about you. This is all my stuff. And you don't have the authority or the right to tell me what I can and can do on my own time. And he simply said that he didn't care what my position was or what the First Amendment said. I could stop speaking, or I could work for him. And so, long story short, my husband and I prayed about it, and we realized that it was really worth something to take a stand. So I told him that he was not the author of my rights, and I wasn't going to trade them for his paycheck. And so he told me I had to quit, and I told him I'm not quitting, so he fired me. And that's what got me started independently. And so that was 8 years ago now. And for the last 7 years, we've taught about 265 classes in over 22 states every single year. I've written 6 books. I have a radio show that's globally heard and nationally syndicated. And we have Liberty First University now, which is online educational training, video format, learn at your own pace. And we are teaching people all over the globe about liberty, from ages 6 to 106.
Wow, that is fantastic. What an amazing story. And I am, I know you're out over the outrage of being fired and the ignorance of people who are our public officials. But I'm sure a lot of our listeners who've heard that for the first time are just thinking, wow, how in the world could he do that or think that way? But I think that it's really interesting in terms of, you've taken the ignorance of your former boss and you're now combating that ignorance by traveling the country and teaching people what the truth is, in the concepts of limited government that is there, to protect our rights, not try to take them away from us.
Right, and we have such a great time. We teach all kinds of people. We teach in, believe it or not, we are invited into public schools, high school, middle school. We teach at colleges. I've taught the legislators of 10 states, and every year we pick up a new state or two. I have a law enforcement course that I teach across the country. That several states have, sheriff's associations have approved my law enforcement class as continuing legal education for their officers, their deputies. And we're really, really excited. A lot of times people say, well, Christiane, what can you possibly be doing when you're teaching the choir? But I don't always teach the choir. As a matter of fact, just last November,
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We are so glad that you are with us. And guess what? It's that time. It's been way too long, but I mean, here we go. We have, yes, that it's time for the weekly Conduit quiz, ladies and gentlemen. And in this week's quiz, we're going over the ever-popular concept of term limits. You know what I'm saying? It's up at conduitforaction.org. Term limits have long been a debated topic in politics at both the federal and state level. Many see term limits as a strong check and balance on public servants and preventing them from becoming career politicians dependent on their public service job. Some argue that the longer a politician is in office, the more susceptible they become to corruption and being bought off for their votes. Others argue that term limits prohibit good public servants from continuing to serve. What's the answer? Well, we'll tell you here in just a minute. Okay. This quiz does not specifically address those arguments, but instead educates the reader on the history of term limits in Arkansas, current Arkansas term limits, and a look at the proposed term limits under a citizens' initiative that may appear on the ballot in November. So here we go. Joe, how you doing, sir?
Doing good.
All right. Now it's been too long since we've done this. Towards the end of the quiz, I mean, this is a positive sound. You got a correct answer, and this is your wrong answer. Okay.
Just one wrong answer.
All right, and then this sound means you're out of time. Because sometimes I think you take too long. So I'm just letting you know that.
Whoa. That's your opinion?
It's my opinion. This is an opinionated show. We've got opinions. Oh, and look, you're on screen there. It's like the Brady Bunch. It's like, but Quiz Town. All right, so question number... What?
We need 7 more people on this.
Yeah, we do. So, when I wanted to sing the song, here's a story, but I couldn't think of anything. Number one.
About a lovely talk show.
When were term limits first passed into the Arkansas Constitution? When were they first passed, okay? 1876, 1920, 1993, or 2014. Now, you know nothing about this, right?
I have not even one clue.
Not even one clue. Okay, so we're going to ask you to use this time to think it out, Joe. 1876, 1920, 1993, or 2014.
I'm really feeling 1920. I'm really feeling 1920 for some reason.
1920, the Arkansas legislature passing term limits. All right, so you think it's 1920. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I hope it's not 1993, because that means Arkansas term limits are as old as I am. Exactly as old as I am.
Really?
Yeah, that's the year I was born.
All right, so here we go. Your time is up. All right, so you're going with 1920.
Yep.
All right, question number 2. Under the original term limits established in Arkansas, how long could a member of the Arkansas House of Representatives serve? Was it 2 4-year terms, 8 years, 2 2-year terms, 4 years, or 3 2-year terms, 6 years, or unlimited? Okay, so under the original term limits established in Arkansas, how long could a member serve? What do you think, Joe? What is it?
I'm trying to think.
All right, well, here, relax it out. Right? We need you to relax while you do this.
The one thing I was never good at in civics was trying to remember how long a term was for
10 seconds.
A member of the House and a member of the Senate in Congress, but it's probably different here. Let's do 8 years, 2 4-year terms, because I'm not sure.
Okay, good, because you were out of time. So you're going with 2 4-year terms,
yeah.
8 years. Okay. Number 3. Under the original term limits established in Arkansas, how long could a member of the Arkansas Senate serve? Was it 2 4-year terms, 8 years, 3 2-year terms, 6 years, 2 6-year terms, 12 years, or was it unlimited?
I'm going to go with 3 2-year terms.
Okay. 3 2-year terms, 6 years. All right. Question number 4. Under the original term limits established in Arkansas, how long could a politician possibly serve in total in the General Assembly in both the House and the Senate? Was it 8 total years, 10 total years, 14 total years, or unlimited?
Well, I'm just going to use simple math here. I'm going to go with 14.
Going with 14.
As far as I'm aware, there wasn't any restrictions on you being able to serve full term in the House and then full term in the Senate.
Okay. All right, on to question 5. That you can find this quiz, by the way, over at conduitforaction.org. When were term limits amended in the Arkansas Constitution?
It definitely wasn't amended 24 years ago, so it was amended in 2014.
2014. Okay, that's your answer, 2014. Your options were 1920, 1976, 1993, and 2014. Question number 6. Who was the lead sponsor of the amendment to increase term limits? Was it former Senator and convicted felon Jake Files? Was it former Senator and convicted felon John Woods? Was it former Senator and convicted felon Hank Wilkins? Or was it current Senator and unconvicted alleged bribee Jeremy Hutchinson? Boy, that is...
Is there not an E for all of the above? Because they probably all had a finger in this in some way.
So which one is it? Which one are you going with?
The felon John Woods.
All right, you're going with B, former Senator and convicted felon John Woods. Again, by the way, I want to remind you here, what I said in the first hour had to do with term limits and, the people who I respectfully disagree with, who are saying that maybe we don't need term limits. And I'm just saying my hypothesis is that the current crop of legislators, some of which I just read off in these multiple choice options, do you think that's because they've been allowed to stay down there too long? And I think the answer is yes. I think they've been allowed to stay down there too long. Question number 7.
I just think they're weak people.
Well, that's the thing, though. We're all weak people. So, and that's the whole point of the whole reason we have the Constitution is because our founders knew we were weak people. And so they said we've got to limit what man can do to other men by force. And so naturally, if you could take the best person in the world and you could send them down to the Marble Palace, and they might be good for a while, but eventually I am going to hedge my bets, and I'm going to say that eventually somebody's going to wear you down. Somebody, because everybody's coming up to you asking you to do the opposite of what you promised your constituents to do, because there is a huge disconnect between the seat of power and what the average person thinks back home. And so, maybe, yeah, is it possible somebody could always stay above the fray? Absolutely, it's possible. It's just not likely. Term limits. Question 7. How were term limits amended and increased? Under a constitutional amendment proposed by the people, under a constitutional amendment proposed by the General Assembly, by statute of the General Assembly, by executive order of the governor. Which one?
A constitutional amendment from the General Assembly.
Okay. Going with B. Question number 8. Currently, what is the total number of years that a person may serve in the General Assembly in either the House or the Senate as stated in the Constitution? 8, 12, 14, or 16?
Pretty sure we covered this the other day. I'm pretty sure it's 16.
Okay. 16 is your answer. Moving on. Question 9. Currently, what are the term limits for the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and all other constitutional officers? Is it 3 2-year terms, 2 4-year terms, 5 2-year terms, or 3 4-year terms?
Well, they're definitely 4-year terms, or else we wouldn't have to deal with ASA as often.
Right.
But actually, no, we wouldn't. No, I take that back.
Yeah.
We'd have to deal with them more because we'd have more campaigns.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they're 4-year terms. I'm trying to remember if it's 2 or 3.
Okay.
I'm hoping it's 2 because that means he gets term limited out this time around. If he gets
that would be correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna go 2.
Okay.
I'm
gonna be 4-year terms.
I'm gonna personally be hopeful after that's 2 years.
Okay.
Or 2 terms.
All right. Number 10, under special provisions of the 2014 Term Limits Amendment, what is the total possible number of years a state senator could possibly serve? 16, 20, or 22 years?
22.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's what you think. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I think, and you would agree with your.
No, that was just involuntary.
I bet it was.
Number 11. Under the proposed term limits constitutional amendment that may appear on the ballot this fall, how long could a person serve in the Arkansas House of Representatives? 2 2-year terms, 3 2-year terms, 2 4-year terms, or 6 2-year terms?
I think it's.
This is the proposed one that we may be voting on this fall if it gets on the ballot.
2 4 years, I think. No. I'm cheating.
I'm going to need an answer. How are you cheating?
I'm scrolling down to look at the answers for the next one because I'm using my brain a little bit here and just if this is
we're going to need an answer.
We're going to do 3 2 years.
Okay, 3 2-year terms for a total of 6 years. That's the proposed term limit. 6 years for the House.
And then
under the proposed term limits that may appear on the ballot this fall, what about the Senate? Is it 2 2-year terms, 4 years, 3 4-year terms, 12 years, 2 4-year terms, 8 years, 6 2-year terms, 12 years? Gonna need an answer.
I don't want to give an answer.
Let's see here. Where's my out of sound? My out of time. This sound means you are out of time.
Well, I have time.
No.
I'm looking at the show clock.
No.
I have time. Hey, I run this show here. All the stuff over here is me.
All right, which one is it? Under the ballot, what about the Senate? What are you going with?
Oh, man.
Come on, your reputation's on the line.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm taking my time with this one. We're just going to go 2 4-year terms. I don't know.
2 4-year terms.
I have not one clue.
Under the proposed term limits constitutional amendment that may appear on the ballot, how long could a politician possibly serve in total in the General Assembly? So the House and the Senate. Is it 6 years, 10 years, 14 years, or 20 years?
I think it's 10.
Going with B, 10.
Because even though I think if I remember correctly, if I remember correctly, which I could very well be remembering incorrectly, that I don't think the
10 years.
Yeah.
You're going with 10 years.
Yeah.
We're moving on. Under the proposed term limits constitutional amendment that may appear on the ballot this fall, does it prohibit the legislature from simply referring out another constitutional amendment to increase term limits? Yes, it requires that term limits only be changed by the people's initiative, not the General Assemblies. Or no, politicians can run roughshod over the will of the people with unchallengeable proposed constitutional amendments with misleading ballot titles.
It'd have to be yes, because if it gets passed, then if it gets passed and this wasn't in there, then they could just change it back.
Okay, so
it'd have to be yes.
What are you thinking, Joe? How do you think you did on this?
I don't know. I think I did horribly.
You think you did bad? All right. Well,
by the way,
question 15.
Just real quick, letting you know, the people watching know this, but you didn't know this. I went back and changed this to 14 years.
Okay, you did, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, so you can, if you haven't subscribed to Conduit Fractions email list, put your email address there, and what town do you live? Feel free, and then hit done. And let's see what your score is.
I didn't
Joe.
want to catch you off guard like I did that one time.
All right, come on.
I went back and changed something, and you weren't
Let's
paying
go.
attention.
What do we have here? Drum roll, please. You got a 71.4%. I think that's because there's a lot of questions in this one.
Really,
you really did bad in the beginning. I mean, you did really awful in the beginning. Like I was thinking, like you were off to. I think you missed like maybe the first 3 or 4 questions.
Missed the first 3. What was the one I missed?
So just so you know, the term limits.
Oh no!
Term limits was first passed not in 1920.
In 1993.
1993.
Wow. I didn't
so we
think
want to correct the record there.
Earlier than that.
And you got wrong. Let's see here. Under the original term limits established, you could serve 3 2-year terms. You said 2 4-year terms.
I got these backwards. Whenever
because this was a House versus the Senate. Yeah, so you got those backwards.
Yeah, I got those.
Okay, so scrolling down here, let me see some of your other. Let's see, you got that right. 14 total years for that. It was amended in 2014 by convicted felon Senator John Woods. You got the next one right too. Term limits amended.
You know what's really sad?
Yeah.
The next one I missed was the one I changed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was, and I got it wrong
with your gut result. Tell all those juniors who are probably going to take some sort of summer ACT prep.
Yeah,
go with your initial
gut. Like whatever you're feeling initially, that's probably the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Don't second guess yourself.
Here, go. I want to get. I want to get down. So obviously, the last question. Let's go to the last question here, because people can determine their own, opinions on this. But this is huge. Number 14. This doesn't get talked about much, but this is going to drive the Marble Palace nuts. Under the proposed term limits constitutional amendment that may appear on the ballot this fall, does it prohibit the legislature from simply referring out another constitutional amendment to increase term limits? Yes, it does. It essentially says if you guys want to set your own term limits, you can't anymore with a legislative vote. You're going to have only the people will be able to change this. So if the legislature wants to stay in power longer, they're going to have to get their citizens together to put it on the ballot. And the reason that this in my opinion must happen, well, you've got really two options here. If you didn't like this option, then the other option is that you have to make legislative ballot titles that are referred out by the General Assembly reviewable by the Attorney General, and they're not. The way it goes now is they can put whatever ballot title they want on there and vote on it, and it appears on the ballot, and there's nothing we can do about it. And that's why convicted felon John Woods' Issue 3 was successful back in 2014, because he deceived everybody. And if you and I get together and write a petition up and a law up, the Attorney General reviews what is going to be on the ballot, and she can reject it saying the title's misleading. But she doesn't have that power. Or he, in this case, Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, currently doesn't have that power when it comes to reviewing legislative acts that, result in a ballot title. So, this is what you get. This is what you get. We've got to wash this stain of Senator John Woods that's affected the entire state. We've got to undo this, and this is a way to do it. And you say, you know what? You're not going to be able. This is going to, on this particular issue, it's going to be a people's initiative. It's going in the Constitution. Yep. And I think it's certainly warranted. So, Joe, I don't know. I think you got to see you passed. Yeah. I'm just going to give you this right here for the whole quiz. I think you did a good job. I was worried, though. I'm going to be honest. I was worried. I thought you were going to flunk the whole thing
after the first three questions.
I really did. I thought, boy, he's going to be very disappointed.
Hey, well, I recovered.
You did. Folks, this is Conduit News, and we're going to take a break. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we're going to introduce you to a young conservative. We've got that segment coming your way. Don't go anywhere. Back in a minute.
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
It's so strange. Some people on Facebook. Now, I'm telling you, some people are divided on this. Hazel, Haskell. Yeah, somebody named Haskell on Facebook writes, I'm for term limits, but what I don't like is deceptive titles to scare people or trick people. Okay, well, then you would have hated the John Woods amendment then, because that was, deception, outright lie. Trick people into voting for something. Restore term limits does just that. It makes it sound like we have no term limits. It makes us no better than the left. I don't know. Does it? I haven't actually, I can't remember. I have looked at the ballot title as written, but I don't know. Does it say restore? Even if it does, I don't have a problem with that, by the way, because we're restoring the way, more closely the way they were. We're restoring the state from being victimized by Senator John Woods. So, but anyway, this same guy Haskell. Listen, Haskell, I appreciate your comment, sir, but I don't know if I agree with the powers that you're subscribing to me when he says, I think Paul does a great job, but if he told you guys to jump off a cliff, you would line up. I don't think so. I think if I told them to jump off a cliff, they would say no. They like living and like life. Oh, man. This isn't a Kool-Aid sound. Yeah. Really, this audience is actually very independent. And there's actually a very diverse group of people, at least that are listening on Facebook, that sometimes there's disagreements or whatever. It's like, hey, okay, we can be congenial and respectfully disagree. Here's the thing with the term limits thing, and this is the only thing that, where I come from on the term limits. Again, if you think the current crop of legislators is, the current crop of, the corruption that we're seeing, do you think that's because they've stayed down there too long? I do. I do think it's because they've been down there long enough to carve out a nice financial niche. It was obvious who'd been down there too long. John Woods had been down there too long. When Mike Neal, as a freshman, sees John Woods' fully furnished apartment. This is according to court testimony. His fully furnished apartment and his autographed Pete Rose bat and his autographed Michael Jordan and his, and he says, wow, John Woods figured out how to make money down here. I need to get in on this. And so he did. And then he pled guilty, and then he testified against John Woods. They're down there too long. Okay. Hey, real quick, have you seen how, we're up against a hard break, but have you seen how the Obama officials have freaked out after what Donald Trump did at the NATO summit yesterday, calling them out? Oh, it's fantastic. All of the Obama officials, they just can't believe it. They're so upset. John Kerry's upset. Former CIA Director John Brennan is upset. They're actually now trying to claim Donald Trump was being critical of Russia, right? He was being critical of Russia and Germany's loyalty to Russia, and somehow Donald Trump's criticism, according to Obama officials, means that he's conspiring with Russia. These people are just absolutely unhinged. We covered that in the first hour of the program. You can get the first hour of the program on the podcast right now over at conduitnews.com.
I taught an entire room full of Bernie Sanders supporters because since Trump has been in office, a whole new group of people want to learn about the Constitution. And frankly, we have found that the choir needs education on the Constitution and its applications and our history. Because although we have a large number of people who believe in the relevance of the Constitution. They'll say we carry our Constitution with us all the time. It's one thing to to hold the document in your hand. It's another thing to read the document, but it's a whole other level to understand why it says what it says to the level that you can actually step up and be an advocate and a defender of the liberties of the people, and that's what we teach you to be.
Wow. We're talking with Chris Ann Hall. Up on her screen there that you see if you're watching online, it says that she's a constitutional attorney. She's actually, much more than that. If you look at her resume, it's very, very impressive. When you said that when you were in law school and then you started reading about the founders and you realized, wow, I'm going to law school and I'm not learning anything about the Constitution. I have a family member who's an attorney, and she said the same thing, that it's, it's just more about case law. It's not actually about, the Constitution and what it means. And so I'm wondering, in the whole educational process, let's take public education, for example. Our kids aren't really learning the truth in school. I mean, maybe some of them are, but by and large, this is information that it seems like is contraband right now to the national education system.
You're absolutely right. And I will say that there are some that are learning because we have met teachers who take the time to teach, and like I said, who take the time to bring us in to teach. We have teachers say, Chris Ann, we need you to come into our schools because you can teach things we can't teach. And I think it's really, really an indictment on society that we don't do more to teach the Constitution and its relevance. I mean, we have an active effort in America, an overwhelming effort in America to teach our young people that the Constitution is not only irrelevant, but that the Constitution is actually a document of oppression to alienate entire generations, entire groups of American students. And so what we try to teach our teachers is that you actually have more latitude than what you believe you have. Most of
Need your daily news fix?
All right. Okay.
Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. Folks, we have these segments called Young Conservative or Conservative Future. We want to highlight younger people who are in the movement, people that you need to know. Please welcome to the program. We have Mr. Brian Plumley is with us. Brian, welcome to Conduit News Radio.
Hey, nice to be here.
So, first of all, Brian, you're 32 years old, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, that is still young, in my opinion. I just turned 34 the other day, and so I've got to believe that 32 is still young. And so I wanted to, first of all, congratulate you because you are the chair of the Baxter County Republican Party, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So how did that happen? How did you get involved? What makes you a conservative?
I would say more than anything, for several reasons, but I would say that I've been a lifelong Republican, but I will say that I think I've taken a greater interest over the years, especially leading up to Donald Trump running for president. For a long time, I thought with the Republican Party, I thought that there were little things that I thought that we needed to change. I would say pretty much on trade. I feel like we've been getting a raw deal for a long time. The idea of globalism is not something I'm fond of. And I think when he started to run, I started to take. I've always been interested. I watch Fox News every day, and try to keep up with the news the best that I can. I've been doing that probably since I was 15 years old. But I'd say when Trump announced to run for president, I started taking a greater interest in politics and conservatism.
So you have been a lifelong conservative or a lifelong Republican, but You say you kind of. So do you think you really got engaged, though? Is that what you're saying with this? The 2016 election really kind of, lit a fire under you.
Yes. I can remember the day that Trump announced, and I sent a text message to friends of mine, quite a few down in Little Rock who are representatives and senators, and I can remember getting so much negative feedback. It was unreal. Like, those people would not talk to me. There was a handful the night that Trump won that sent me a text message and said, "Hey, you were right. He won the whole thing."
Now, you mean the night that he beat Hillary, or the night that he got the nomination?
Well, both, actually, to be honest with you. There was many people that did not give him a chance, and it really got on my nerves that so many people have gotten to a point to where they take no pride in our country. I mean, all these other countries have walls, they have borders, and I don't know why we're not any different.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people hate that in the political arena anyways. The American people, on the other hand, want that type of deal.
Well, so let me ask you this, Brian, because I would have probably been one of those people that not that I wouldn't have talked to you, but I would have been one of those people that I wasn't for Trump in the primary, right? I mean, and it's just because I'm a talk radio host and I've been talking about really specific constitutional issues for years and that sort of thing. And Donald Trump, you didn't hear any of that. You heard just kind of more platitudes, not the specifics. And so I definitely wasn't a supporter of his in the primary. When he won the nomination, I will admit, I just, I had some problems at first, maybe for like a week. I was upset about it, and I kind of wanted to just take my ball and go home. But then you realize, wait a second, Hillary Clinton cannot be president, and it ended up being like the easiest vote I ever made. And now to see what he's doing, to see his successes, to see the potential denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, to see Saudi Arabia recognize Israel's right to exist, to see what Donald Trump did yesterday at that NATO breakfast, calling out Germany for having 70% of their natural gas or their gas is coming from Russia, and yet we're supposed to spend 4% of our GDP to protect Russia in the NATO alliance. I mean, it is just, and not to mention the Supreme Court nomination and kind of confirmation of Neil Gorsuch. I mean, he really has delivered, not to mention the embassy being moved to Jerusalem. I mean, it's really crazy accomplishments that, I mean, there are still never Trumpers who claim to be conservative out there that, don't understand, the gravity and the things that he's doing that are good for this country.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and there's some of that out there, and I'm with you. Like, I had many people, like I believe in the Constitution from beginning to end, and I did have people out there that at that time that it was really pretty much, I think, for the most part, there was people like me that were for Trump, and there was other people along my same beliefs that were for Ted Cruz, and I think either one would have been a great pick.
But here's the thing. Well. Yeah, I was a Ted Cruz supporter as well, but I don't think Ted Cruz could have won Pennsylvania. I don't think he would have won Wisconsin. You know what I mean? I mean, it was absolutely the perfect storm for somebody like Donald Trump to appeal to those northern independent voters.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, so we're talking with Brian Plumley. Now, Brian, what do you do aside from being the chairman of the Baxter County Republicans? Do you live in Mountain Home?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what do you do?
I'm the city clerk here in Mountain Home. I was elected 8 years ago, and I was actually, at the time that it happened, it was in September of 2010. I was the youngest, to my knowledge anyways, the youngest elected official in the state of Arkansas at that time. And then, ironically enough, 4 months later, Richard Castor took office, who was our former county chairman, and he was 18 years old at the time.
He took your title then?
Yes, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. I hear Richard does that. Me and Richard are good friends, so I can make fun of. I can give him a hard time. Well, so that's fantastic. So you're the city clerk. So what do you try to? Obviously, as a conservative, I mean, you see the inner workings of government, and do you? Are you a limited government guy? I mean, when you think of conservatism,
absolutely.
Do you think limited government?
Absolutely. And I think that's what's sad, what we see so much today when it comes to state government, local government, and education. So many people, when it's not their actual money, and I'm not necessarily referring to our city. I think we do a great job of doing with what we have. But I see all around when it comes to, to local government, county government, other places, and state government, and education, I see so many times where people want more. Like, there's never, you give them a budget, it doesn't matter how much you increase it, they're going to want more. Like, they're going to spend it no matter what. And I'm a believer in limited government.
Okay, so you just raised a great point, Brian, because what we talk about on the program a whole lot is because of what you just said. If you give it to them, they're going to find a way to spend it, whether it's the local level or whether the state level. So if we want to control the size of government, we've got to give government less money. I mean,
yes.
You got to cut off that flow of revenue to them and force them to shrink, in my opinion.
And I'll say this, don't get me wrong, when it comes to, we'll say, for instance, state taxes, somebody and money pays for those roads that we pave. On the same token, too, it baffles me, like on my level, I can remember the first year that I got there and with the city of Mountain Home, and whenever we would have council meetings, I would say, hey, when we're done with the meeting, can I have your folder back? We're going to reuse them. And I can remember one council person saying, why? They cost 5 cents.
Wow.
And I told them, I said, it's not a matter of that they're 5 cents. It's a matter of principle. I try to treat our tax dollars like they are my own. And I don't think enough of that goes on when it comes to government.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right there. I know you mentioned, tax dollars, state tax dollars, and roads. I mean, I was just talking the other day about how, according to the last fiscal year, the state of Arkansas took a record amount of money from the people, and yet we still don't have the type of roads that we want here. We still have, we have the state police telling people, I don't know if you saw the report saying, hey, you can't drive in the left-hand lane, unless you're passing. So you don't just camp out of the left-hand lane. Well, people are camping out in the left-hand lane because the right-hand lane is going to tear up their suspension. And then we have you're taking record revenue from us, and they're obviously spending it on something other than roads because, for the last 3 or 4 years, we've had to, shake the couch, turn the couch upside down to try to get the federal matching money for the highways. And it's just extremely frustrating. And so now what do they talk about? In 2017, they tried to pass a gas tax. And they still are thinking about, passing a gas tax next time because they've got to have more money. And I'm always like, Brian, we're already giving the government money to do these things. What's the problem here? What other priorities do we have that maybe, if we're honest with ourselves, a majority of Arkansans would say, you know what, I'd rather have roads than have whatever it is you're spending this money on,
And it's out there, and I'll say this: in many cases where we are in north central Arkansas, when it comes to the roads, we've seen some progress, and but there's been many times in the past where those tax dollars have made their way to central Arkansas, to northwest Arkansas, to the Jonesboro area, and have not made their way here. It's gotten a little bit better, but I'd like to see some more improvement as well.
Yeah.
And I'm not placing blame on anybody.
No. I mean, there's certainly, that's always been a critique. Every region of the state is jealous of the other region's roads in some degree.
Yes.
The grass is always greener. That's for sure. Hey, Brian, let me ask you this: how's the economy doing up that way with Bull Shoals, Lake Norfolk? I know in the last couple of years, had those heavy rains that came in and kind of flooded everything and made the lakes a little bit less attractive for tourists, but are things kind of back to normal this summer?
I'd say for the most part, yes.
Okay. Well, that's
it helps
good.
when you have a hot summer. People tend to use the lakes more. So I think so.
Okay, good. Well, it's a vital part of Arkansas's economy, and you want, especially a lot of those small businesses around there. I mean, the last couple of years, I know there's some boat dealers and mechanics, things like that, and it's like, hey, if a big rain comes through or a bunch of rain comes through in the spring and then essentially washes or floods the lake, it can be really devastating to some of those businesses up there. So I hope they're having a good year, because it does seem like a lot of people are excited to cool off. Brian Plumlee, I so appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate your conservative viewpoints, and what you said about President Trump is great, and I'm glad that you're the Republican chairman of the Baxter County Committee there. That's fantastic.
Paul, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
All righty, let's do it again, Brian, and be safe. Have a great day, sir. Folks, we're going to take a break. The telephone number to call or text, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. We'll be back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment. From the beginning, authors of our Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and the Federalist Papers advocated the general election of people who possess wisdom, discernment, and loyalty to their constituents. Why? The people expect their representatives to uphold their promises. The representatives recognize the honor bestowed by these constituents. Advancement comes from their followers, not the government. Elections are frequent, and accountability is a compelling factor to loyalty and support from constituents. From a July 5th, 1929 speech by President Calvin Coolidge. This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Okay, so we have some developments on the national front, and I guess at the beginning of the first hour, we brought you this audio from yesterday. I'm going to play it one more time. President Donald Trump at the NATO meeting, but then I'm going to tell you some developments. It looks like Donald Trump may have his leadership may have actually really paid off, literally paid off. Listen to this.
I'm also looking forward to your thoughts about the meeting with President Putin later on.
Well, I have to say, I think it's very sad when Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia. So we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting all of these countries, and then numerous of the countries go out and make a pipeline deal with Russia, where they're paying billions of dollars into the coffers of Russia. So we're supposed to protect you against Russia, but they're paying billions of dollars to Russia, and I think that's very inappropriate. And the former chancellor of Germany is the head of the pipeline company that's supplying the gas. Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got in. It should have never been allowed to have happened. But Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO, and I don't think it should have happened. And I think we have to talk to Germany about it. On top of that, Germany is just paying a little bit over 1%, whereas the United States, in actual numbers, is paying 4.2% of a much larger GDP. So I think that's inappropriate also. You know, we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting everybody, and yet we're paying a lot of money to protect. Now, this has been going on for decades. This has been brought up by other presidents, but other presidents never did anything about it because I don't think they understood it or they just didn't want to get involved. But I have to bring it up because I think it's very unfair to our country. It's very unfair to our taxpayer. And I think that these countries have to step it up, not over a 10-year period. They have to step it up immediately. Germany is a rich country. They talk about they're going to increase it a tiny bit by 2030. Well, they could increase it immediately tomorrow and have no problem. I don't think it's fair to the United States. So we're going to have to do something because we're not going to put up with it. We can't put up with it, and it's inappropriate. So we have to talk about the billions and billions of dollars that's being paid to the country that we're supposed to be protecting you against. You know, everybody's talking about it all over the world. They'll say, well, wait a minute, we're supposed to be protecting you from Russia, but why are you paying billions of dollars to Russia for energy? Why are countries in NATO, namely Germany, having a large percentage of their energy needs paid, you know, to Russia and taken care of by Russia? Now, if you look at it,
it's so great.
Germany is a captive of Russia because they supply. They got rid of their coal plants. They got rid of their nuclear.
All right, stop. So everybody out there, the Obama. I mean, listen to this. Before I get to the new developments, the reports from CNBC. Former White House officials, according to Breitbart, who served under Barack Obama, are criticizing President Donald Trump for those remarks you just heard. John Kerry, the former CIA director, John Brennan, it is in the interest of America's security, and NATO leaders push back against the reckless behavior of Donald Trump. Push back against it. Ben Rhodes, Putin has NATO in disarray. GOP members of Congress talking down his attack on our democracy. U.S. standing abroad in free fall, and a summit with the U.S. president will upstage the Western alliance. A pretty good return on his investment. I mean, they're trying to claim that Donald Trump criticizing Russia is actually him being in bed with Russia. But you hear his tough talk. Why aren't you paying your fair share, NATO? Why is the U.S. paying over 4%, according to Donald Trump, 4.2%, and Germany can't even meet the 2% requirement? This just in from CNBC. Headline, Trump says that the NATO withdrawal is unnecessary, meaning not going to withdraw from NATO, because allies have agreed to increase spending. The U.S. president, let me just read the actual article here. President Donald Trump said NATO allies had committed to raising their defense spending beyond the 2% on Thursday morning, following a flurry of public diatribes against key members of the 29-nation bloc. Quote, NATO is much stronger now than it was 2 days ago, Donald Trump told reporters in Brussels, shortly after he had prompted an unscheduled crisis meeting among the group's members. The U.S. president claimed NATO allies had made unprecedented commitments to increase spending on their own defense before adding he believed he could pull out of the group without congressional approval. However, he then said this would now be unnecessary because allies had agreed to increase their defense spending. Folks, if this is true, if this report is accurate from CNBC, Donald Trump in 48 hours of just leading and confronting NATO with their own hypocrisies, confronting Germany by saying you want us to protect you from Russia, that's what NATO was for in the first place, and yet your former chancellor is the head of the pipeline company, and now you're captive because 70% of your energy you're dependent on Russia giving it to you. And then he says you've got to increase. He uses that hypocrisy to say, I'm basically I'm going to keep talking about this or try to undo the deal unless you guys start spending more money and contributing what you're supposed to contribute and let us, save some money. I mean, right now, you think what we spend on NATO, if they increase their spending, then theoretically the U.S. could decrease what it's spending, and maybe spend that money here. It's absolutely amazing. It's the leadership is. I don't think. I mean, in my lifetime, listen. I've read the speeches. I've listened to the speeches. I've watched the speeches of Reagan. I was born in 1984. I wasn't politically sentient until much later. So as far as I'm concerned, President Reagan in the White House might as well have been a myth to me, because every president after that has essentially just been a status quo, has not been a reformer, has been a part of the swamp, if you will. And I never, ever thought there would be anybody even close in terms of deed, in terms of action, call it America first or whatever, or just call it peace through strength is what I would call it. And yet I think we're witnessing this. I think as far as I'm concerned, what I thought could never happen appears to be something very similar to what we experienced in the 80s, what the country experienced in the 80s. Hey, folks, guess what today is? Today is my 10-year anniversary with my beautiful wife, who I love dearly. And I just wanted to, she may be listening right now. But anyway, if she is, happy birthday. I'm sorry. Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. I hope she isn't listening now. Folks, Arkansas, thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you tomorrow, Johnny Cash Friday. Be safe.